Financial power struggle intensifies as IMF head criminally charged immediately after IMF announces reforms. December 22, 2015, BenjaminFulford.net. The International Monetary Fund last week made a big push to position its SDR currency as a replacement for the US dollar. The U.S. Congress finally, after 5 years foot-dragging, approved IMF voting reform, diluting G7 power, after which the organization announced it was doubling its money to 477 billion SDR, 660 billion US dollars, from 238 billion SDR, about $330 billion. IMF.org. Somebody apparently was not pleased because, immediately after this announcement, French police pressed criminal charges against IMF head Christine Lagarde. IndianExpress.com. The last IMF head, Dominique Strauss-Kahn, was arrested on trumped-up rape charges and dismissed from office when he tried to push the SDR as a US dollar replacement. The CIA was behind that operation, according to CIA sources. Let us see if Lagarde does any better. Lagarde is protected. They're not going to touch her. Another sign the US dollar and the people who control it are involved in high-level financial warfare was the rate hike announced by the US Federal Reserve Board last week. The official reason for the rate hike, a strong US economy, was a bold-faced lie, as all real economic indicators show the U.S. economy remains in a tailspin. Furthermore, this rate hike will have the effect of taking money from small banks who lend to real businesses to the big banks who control the Fed and whose main business is gambling. The real reason for this rate hike was to protect the no longer American U.S. dollar, not the U.S. economy. In any case, the rate hike was a failure in that the dollar fell instead of rising. Long-term interest rates also fell, meaning the market expects deflation and not the supposed inflation the rate hike was supposed to stop. The U.S. government finally agreeing to dilute its power at the IMF while the Fed raises interest rates are probably connected to U.S. corporate government efforts to stave off bankruptcy. In other words, as a condition for additional funding, the U.S. was forced to hand over de facto control of the IMF and pay more interest to foreigners who own U.S. dollars. The fact the U.S. sent B-52 bombers over Chinese territory last week was also almost certainly connected to high-level secret negotiations to keep the U.S. corporate government afloat. Essentially, the Americans were yet again using their nuclear war card to try to get a better deal. Another sign something fundamental has changed is the fact the U.S. government has done a 180-degree about turn in its policy towards Syria last week by supporting a UN resolution that does not call for the ouster of Syrian President Assad. The U.S. and Israel, until now often condemned at the UN by the rest of the world, have shown signs of regime change by voting for a unanimous UN resolution aimed at cutting off ISIS finances. The resolution targets the family of Turkish President Erdogan, the Kurdish Barzani family, the Bush crime family, Israel, Exxon, BP, and others. As a Pentagon official put it, quote, "It is poetic justice that the unanimous UN vote was chaired by U.S. Treasury Secretary Jack Lew, an Orthodox Jew." The latest U.S. Defense Intelligence Department intelligence also reveals the Bushes and their neocon buddies have been shipping oil tanker trucks, pickup trucks, and other equipment to ISIS from Houston, Texas, Pentagon sources say. The trucks are being modified in Israel and then are sent to the war zone via Turkey and Jordan, they say. Pentagon generals and rank and file are also becoming increasingly suspicious of U.S. Defense Secretary Ashton Carter, Carter was in Turkey recently where he ordered an airstrike in Iraq that killed 25 Iraqi soldiers. The sources say Carter ordered the attack as punishment for the Iraqis after they refused an offer by him to send special operations troops and Apache helicopters. The U.S. Special Forces were also recently refused entry in Libya, indicating a growing international distrust in their leadership. The Pentagon officials say Carter's use of personal emails for Department of Defense business may be used as a reason to remove him from office. This is the same thing Hillary Clinton has been under attack for. In any case, Turkey's Erdogan has apparently blinked after seeing his Israeli and other U.S. allies lose power one by one. Last week, Turkey succumbed to universal international pressure and withdrew the troops it had sent into Iraq. The other Middle Eastern rogue state, Saudi Arabia, continues to struggle desperately for survival. As a part of this, the Saudi government last week announced a 34-nation alliance against terrorism, quote-unquote. Unfortunately for the Ibn Saud crime family, the most important nations in this so-called coalition denied being a part of it. Pakistan, the only nuclear-armed Islamic state, openly denied Saudi claims they were allies. Independent.co.uk. Indonesia and Malaysia, two other major Islamic powers, are also not planning to militarily support the Saudi regime. Leaders in most genuine Muslim countries are fully aware that Saudi royal family are not really Muslims, but rather members of the Satan-worshipping Khazarian mafia. With oil prices dropping to $30 a barrel and with hedges made at $70 a barrel starting to expire, the Saudis will soon no longer be able to afford the mercenary armies that are keeping them in power. This in turn will affect the big banks like Citibank that rely on recycling Saudi oil money for a large part of their business. Big bankruptcies are expected in January and February in connection with all this. There are also a series of moves being made against the Khazarian mafia inside the United States. Sheldon Adelson and Rupert Murdoch, two major Khazarian power brokers, have been shown to be using corporate control of the media to tell lies and distort court cases. The New York Times has also been caught deleting important news from its pages. ProjectCensored.org, ZeroHedge.com. These revelations, all coming out in 1 week, are a sign of a rebellion against corporate distortion of news. Khazarian attempts to decentralize corporate control are also coming under closer scrutiny. For example, a U.S. Justice Department investigation of the recent attempt by the two chemical giants, Dow and DuPont, to merge, has revealed that Vanguard is the #1 shareholder in both and that another Khazarian front, BlackRock, is also involved. The monopoly-creating move is not expected to be approved. The Chinese also acted to prevent the widely hated Monsanto Corporation and its Goldman Sachs banker from getting a monopoly on world food supply by having ChemChina buy the Swiss agribusiness Syngenta. Meanwhile, on the Russian front, further confirmation came out last week that Vladimir Putin is not exactly real. This is nonsense. A Russian FSB agent affiliated with the White Dragon Society, whose company protects Russian oligarchs, has said Putin is just a series of lookalikes who read scripts and pretend to be a powerful leader. The real leader of Russia is now said to be Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov. This is pure nonsense. Take a look at these pictures of Lavrov and Putin and see for yourself which of the two men appears to be in charge. No, it's... ZeroHedge.com, SEMP.com. Then, to confirm the Russian genome has produced plenty of Putin lookalikes, take a look at the photos of, quote, Putin, one dating from 1920 and another from 1941 and another from 2015. This is just a stupid internet viral hoax that was intentionally made to obfuscate. It's just a picture of a man who has a slight resemblance to Putin. It doesn't mean he's a vampire or whatever such nonsense you're saying. The Russians use, quote, Putin as a symbol of their unified leadership, but make no mistake, Russian unity is not dependent on a single, killable, charismatic leader. That's true. Speaking about charismatic leaders, Canada's new Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, is shaping up to be one. His multi-ethnic rainbow cabinet and his call for legalization of marijuana really have raised high hopes for his government in Canada. Everybody this writer met there hoped and wished for the best with his new government. However, during a visit to Canada last week, a member of Canada's Security Intelligence Services contacted this writer with information about his father, Pierre Trudeau. According to this CSIS source, Pierre Trudeau was blackmailed with pedophile charges into ending the use of government-owned Bank of Canada money to finance government operations without taxes or debt. Instead, he forced Canada into Babylonian-style debt slavery to Khazarian mafia banks. Pedophilia allegations aside, it is a known fact that it was Trudeau who ended the use of Bank of Canada free money to finance the government. Let us see if Justin will turn out to be just a feel-good, look-nice stooge, or if he will undo his father's crime. If he fails to return the Bank of Canada to its original mandate, then you can be sure there are members of the Canadian public, as well as the public and intelligence services, who will make him accountable. On a final note, it is clear that world trade and markets are not functioning properly now, as oil tankers float around with nowhere to go, and as world trade continues to plummet while markets tumble. ZeroHedge.com. Japanese businessmen with extensive operations in China say China's economy is also in worse shape than government figures show. Some sort of systemic collapse is taking place in slow motion. This will not happen overnight, but as in the fall of the Soviet Union, looking back, it will seem as if an entire political economic system collapsed almost instantly. In this case, Babylonian debt slavery and mind control-based government, govern equals control, meant equals mind, will collapse.